His Excellency, Mr. Dean Barrow, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Belize. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Belize is a country blessed with the largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere, the second longest in the world, thousands of beautiful coral islands, and abundant mangrove, broadleaf, and pine forests. Unfortunately, we're not here to list our natural riches, to extol them. Rather, it is to lament their destruction, to testify to the havoc that is being wrought on our environment by anthropogenic global warming. As a developing country and low-lying coastal nation, Belize is among the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and is now classified as one of the top 10 most affected countries. In the past 11 years, Belize has suffered devastation from 6 major hurricanes: Mitch, Keith, Iris, Chantal, Dean, and Arthur, fueled by high sea surface temperatures, destroyed our crops, battered our coral reefs, flooded our streets, washed away our bridges, ruined our tourism infrastructure, and ran us out of our homes. Those reefs, jewels in our environmental crown, have also been turned into skeletons by massive coral bleaching events in 1995, 1998, 2005, 2008, and 2009. Those reefs, resplendent and life-giving, internationally famous, are in too many spots now, nothing more than graveyards. In Belize, then, global warming has already eroded our major economic sectors, agriculture, fisheries, and tourism, and caused irreparable damage to our ecology. From the hurricanes alone, there has been loss to our small economy in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And looking again at the numbers, it is more than 50% of our reefs that have been killed off either by damage during storms or by coral bleaching. Yet, the social and economic demands of our population continue to increase. So we struggle to meet the Millennium Development Goals, but we're assaulted on all sides by the destructive impacts of climate change. Now, Belize, with its low level of industrialization and low population, is one of the tiniest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. But we have been at the forefront of innovative mitigation actions. In February 1995, we were the first country to implement a fully funded forest sector project under the US Initiative on Joint Implementation. We have chartered both solar and hydroelectricity projects, and these have resulted since 1991 in a drastic 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the energy sector, despite a 4-fold increase in demand. But the threat of future extinction is not held at bay by our unilateral mitigation actions. Global warming knows no boundaries, and the greenhouse gas emissions from the heavily industrialized nations will, quite literally, continue to sink us. We therefore must depend on those nations responsible for the highest emissions, whether developed or developing, to act urgently and decisively here in Copenhagen. It goes without saying, then, that Belize fully supports the mitigation targets advocated by AOSIS, long-term stabilization of atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations at well below 350 parts per million, limitation of global average surface temperature increases to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the peaking of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2015 and their sharp decline thereafter, reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions of greater than 85% below 1990 levels by 2050, and Annex I parties reducing their collective GHG emissions by more than 45% below 1990 levels by 2020, and more than 95% below 1990 levels by 2050. To us, the most vulnerable, the most at risk, any compromise on these targets constitutes a violation of our human rights. As a nation with over 65% natural forest cover, and one that has demonstrated its commitment to sustainable forest management, Belize also recognizes the potential of REDD as an important component of an overall mitigation strategy. We emphasize, however, that their participation in REDD cannot serve as an excuse for lessening the commitment of Annex I countries to drastically reduce their own emissions. We thus exhort all high-emitting nations to take action. But we simultaneously point out that even the most ambitious cuts in greenhouse gas emissions will not be sufficient to turn the clock back on the current impacts of climate change. The genie is out the bottle, and nations such as Belize are already suffering too much. We can, however, avert complete social, economic, and environmental catastrophes. And so, we call upon the developed countries to provide comprehensive financing that would generate predictable new and additional resources to support our adaptation and mitigation actions. In closing, I wish to point out that it takes no act of genius to recognize either the general global pickle we are in or the particular plight of small island and low-lying coastal states. Accordingly, the longer-term avoidance of adverse climate change effects overall, but their immediate amelioration vis-à-vis the most vulnerable, must be the measuring stick for success at this conference. This is a time, therefore, for large hearts rather than small minds. It is a time for the commonality of compassion rather than the hubris of power. Near the start of the second decade of the new millennium, all eyes are on Copenhagen. Let the potentates of the world not fail the test, not fail the basic cause of our shared humanity. Thank you.